This program is part of the Scene Projects Podcast Network. Welcome into the Get Better Together Project with your hosts, Bubba and Sarah. This show's all about being honest with your friends and yourself. Listen to our weekly check-ins and become part of our community. That's how we all get better together. Enjoy the show. The Scene Projects are brought to you by these fine sponsors: Cliff Avenue Upholstery and Restoration, Chevy Girl Advertising and Booking, Sunny Radio, and SiouxFallsPodcast.com. Welcome into a very exciting episode of The Scene. I am your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today is my friend and author, Walking Crow. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm very well, sir. Before we get too far into everything, why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Well, my name is Walking Crow. I am transformational sacred drum medicine. And when I say that, it's just not a title. It's I embody the transformational sacred drum medicine, whether it's healing practices, whether it's the drum, birthing rattles, teaching ceremonies, whatever it is that I'm needed for, wanted for. I am the embodiment of those things. I'm native to Mexico. My people are Tarahumara, Purépecha, Chichimeca, but I was never raised with my people. I was raised as an American kid in Los Angeles. You know how that goes sometimes. But at the age of around 50, I came back to center to walk my path and the path that I was always meant to walk. And that's what I do now. I live in Sedona. I live a quiet, peaceful life as a single male who offers services to those who are in need or in want, I'd rather say. And I am a part of the Star Knowledge Peace Conference. I vend drums there, and sometimes I speak. And I'm very proud to be able to do that. Saying that, we birthed a 30-inch buffalo hide powwow drum the day after the event ended in November there. And Eddie Hensley has that drum with him there next door to Nikki. And the drum is so powerful. And you mentioned community. The drum really represents the common unity within the community that Chief Golden Light Eagle created, and Nikki's carrying forward, and Terry Rivera and Thomas are carrying forward, and others. And I'm so proud to be able to be a part of that. I'm proud to be able to have met you as well, Bubba, at that event.
Well, and exactly where I wanted to pick it up. We got to sit with each other. I didn't get to spend a lot of time there. And as I told, I just saw Nikki and Linda and Eddie and I just saw them all last night at Sweat. And you talk about community, and it's not necessarily for me, because I'm part of so many communities. It's not necessarily that it's the time that I spend there that I'm fully there. And no better encapsulation of that than being at the conference, even though it might have only been a few hours. It completely changed my life. You know, I was able to find your book, Transformation of a Walking Crow, which I am very grateful for. You shared your story in there, and I found so many similarities with my own story. There's no doubt that it changed me, not just my mind, but my own DNA, just by reading your words and by reading your story. And it gave me a much better idea of what we are doing as a podcast, right? We're sharing each other's stories. And yes. That's what heals our community, is getting all these stories out there, bringing these things to light is what it's all about. So I really appreciated your book. I absolutely, I dug right into it when I left the conference, and I was so excited to have you on the show to share a little bit of your story with our listeners as well.
Well, I'm really proud and honored to find connection with others within the stepping stones of my pathway, which wherever it started and however it continues, because it's not just obviously just not my story alone. It's everybody's story, right? Sometimes we just don't have the belief that somebody else would feel the same way we do or has experienced the same thing, and we don't say it or ask because of potential shame or embarrassment or whatever the case may be, But I'm really honored to have you walking the same path with me, if you will.
Well, and I'm very fortunate to have you, and I won't call you an elder, even though you are, probably a few decades older than I am. But maybe I should. It was the education that you gave me just by sharing your story. You're not preaching in your book at all, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing in there that's preaching. You're literally just telling your story as it happened, as you saw it, and then, maybe able to not just saw it in the moment, but saw it after reflection years later and doing the work on yourself to, like you said, come back to center and to find that true purpose in your life.
Right. And my purpose I have found because I didn't, for years or a lifetime, the first half of my lifetimes, there's two of them, I thought my purpose was doing what they wanted, being what they wanted, becoming what they wanted, being a dutiful son, a dutiful student, a dutiful Catholic, or whatever that was. And that wasn't my purpose. That was their purpose. And my purpose is just sharing the voice that I've been given after a lifetime of not sharing it, and moving forward and allowing others to have their voice or be the example of having a voice so they can have theirs as well. Aho.
I love that music has always been a part of your life, and now it is essentially your whole life.
Yeah.
Similar backgrounds, right? I grew up in a family that music was very important to us. I've played guitar since I was, 12 years old. I was in concert band before that. Music has always been important to me. Writing songs has always been important to me. The problem is that for musicians, and especially when you get into this at a young age, you're exposed to a lot of things that you probably shouldn't have been exposed to in the first place, right? My father thought it was completely okay to take me into the bars to play with his band and to see a bunch of drunk people and I look back now and I'm like, I don't know that I would put my kid in that same situation, right? Because it exposed me to that party side of it. And I know that you struggled with addiction for years. I myself have struggled with addiction. I think I still, in some ways, although I've left most of the hard, or all of the hard drugs alone. I am a medical marijuana user, and, I have my card here in South Dakota. But you talk about the, how when you put it down and you made that decision that you never went back to that. Do you feel that, sobriety and leaving the other substances alone kind of opened the door for your purpose to kind of walk through?
Eventually, because as I got sober, I was still trying marriage over and over and over again. You know what they say about trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I didn't know how to be married. I didn't know how to be in a relationship. I didn't have a very good relationship with my mother. How could I have a better relationship with women? For me, it was strictly sexual, and I was using it just like I was using beer or pot or drugs or whatever it was. I was food, whatever it was. But as I stayed sober and made the mistakes and or not made the mistakes and moved forward, substances, the awareness of what I was doing with substances, no matter what they were, became less and less. I didn't have a need or want for fixing something with something else. I took to taking care of myself in a raw way. And when I found healing I learned that there was a lot that I wasn't feeling, hadn't felt, and energy healing opened me up to healing the feeling and feeling the healing that was about to take place over the next decade plus in my life. And that's what's happened. I mean, I was obese. I was 238 pounds when I became the healer. And as I went along, I started to, I mean, it was almost overnight transformation, went from 238 to 160 pounds. And since then, between 140 and 155, and have never gone back. I think my body was just ready and free to do what it wanted to do, not what society or others wanted me to do or have the behavior. Because, in the 60s, they advertised alcohol freely and smoking and all that stuff. And then that went away, but it all went underground then came cocaine and pot and all kinds of other things. And I was definitely involved. But once I found the end of that line, there was no end of the line. There was a beginning of a different sort of line for me, right? Where I got to say yes to me and no to those things. And they never became a part of my yes again, those things that were unhealthy to my soul.
Well, and maybe fortunately for me and unfortunately for you, society is so much different. Addiction and all these things are not as taboo as they were even 20 years ago. So for someone like yourself who grew up through the 70s and 80s and 90s as excess and all these things were that's just the way that it was, right? That was life. That's how you were supposed to live, hard and fast and out in a blaze of glory. Right. Where we are learning so much more, all the research that's been done, the consciousness level of society as a whole, of the whole earth is such at such a higher vibration now than it was decades past. I think I'm maybe in thousands of years that we haven't been at this level of awareness. And I think in some ways we have to credit the beauty of what the internet is. And I do that a lot here because I wouldn't be talking to you without the internet, right? Like yes, we met physically in person, but the reason I'm a part of those communities is because I have this online community.
Right. Likewise. I mean, there are people, I just got back. When I saw you, it was the beginning of my journey, a 3-week journey into the Midwest and drum birthing and ceremonies and full moon ceremony and building the event there in South Dakota and birthing the powwow drum. All this medicine happened because I'm on the internet and people hear me speak. And somebody asked me along the way, how did you get so famous? I said, famous? I'm infamous. I'm not famous. I'm from Los Angeles and fame doesn't sit well with me because that speaks to the ego. And I believe that the things that I do speak to more the soul. And I don't want to be famous for being somebody. I would rather be a conscious observer, a conscious activist without thought of myself and my ego. And fame has nothing to do with it. I have a strong voice and I'm willing to use the internet as a tool. And I used to do videos, Bubba, and I would post them on communities that I liked, that I was a part of. But over the years, what's happened is when I do a video live on social media, it automatically has hundreds or thousands of views that are organic, and I don't have to do that anymore. Because I've said so much and I've been so consistent, and consistency is the magic that I live in, because I'm consistent about my words, my feelings, my understanding. I won't lie to you, and I won't lie to myself by lying to you at the same time. So it's really, the internet has been a real magical vehicle for me. As much as I don't like a lot of it, I love plenty of it.
And that speaks to what we all want right now is people we can trust. And
Yeah.
we all know that anyone can make a fancy video and BS you. And they might be able to BS you for years, right? But when someone like yourself has been doing this for, decades, and, maybe not the videos and stuff so much, but at least a decade of posting these videos, you can go back and see your track record. And that's kind of where I live with the podcast and everything now, is that we're building trust. I'm not doing this to be famous. I'm doing this because I absolutely love having conversations with interesting people.
Right.
And and me sharing my stories, right, and being open and honest is what brings people into our world. And then that validates you when you come on the show to me, and it just keeps building and building and building.
I like that you talked about trust. And when clients come here, and most of my clients are women, when they come to my healing room or my ceremony, one of the biggest things they say is that they trust me. And I feel honored to be trustworthy in the eyes of women, because in my past life, I wasn't a trustworthy male. I was a drunk. I was a drug addict. I was an abuser. I was a lot of things that I'm not proud of, but it's part of the step. Those are the stepping stones of how I became trustworthy and honest. I'm an honest guy. It's weird for me to say that sometimes, because I know who I was, and I didn't trust police, politicians, and I still don't. I don't trust the greater part of the world because they're untrustworthy. But those that I trust, that I give my trust to, or I receive their trust, it's just magical. The people that have their chiefs and grandmothers and grandfathers and brothers and sisters and strangers and their cashiers at a gas station, their waiters in restaurants, their people in a rest stop, and it's wonderful to be me in that world now.
I love it. I love that that Chief Golden Light Eagle built this beautiful community, of which his daughter Nikki Zephyr, good friend of the show, has continued kind of in his honor. I don't think that she had much of a choice in it. I think the community was going to go on anyway. I'm very new. I just met Nikki back in February of this year and being introduced to all these people, but I call these people my family now. Right. Yeah. And that's because we've built this trust, and, reading her father's words in the books that he's written, and getting to listen to all of this audio and video that they've saved over the years, and then getting to go out to a space that I know he frequented and that that they're at, to go to their home and to join them and to be allowed into that community. It actually allows me to trust myself even more, that these people have put their trust in me just to be present.
Isn't that beautiful?
Absolutely is.
People like us, and why wouldn't we have become trustworthy? Because we are trustworthy. Because I was never trustworthy at growing up, because I wasn't taught how to be. Right? I was taught how to be an enabler. I was taught how to be a drunk. I was taught how to be all kinds of things, but I wasn't taught to be trustworthy. I went to a Catholic school where they would slap us and hit us and punish us for being human. Humans make mistakes. Hi, human. Hello, human. I believe that we learn from our mistakes. We don't learn from punishment. How many guys get paroled and get sent back because they did it again?
I did 2 years in the prison right down the road from me, and I saw it in the time I was there. Guys would get out, they'd be back 2 weeks later. It's like, man, you barely had time to catch the bus. What are you doing?
Right.
But that was also motivation for me to be like, that ain't going to be me. I got out and got off of parole as fast as humanly possible. Right. And committed to, sobriety, and committed to doing the things that I needed to do to move that forward. Right. But I say it a lot that, prison changed me, and it wasn't just, 2 years of sobriety, and it was that, what's the word I'm looking for? It was the rite of passage, right? Because we kind of lack those, especially in what I guess I would say like Caucasian culture, besides like maybe the military, or like there's no real rites of passage anymore. I know that a lot of Native communities have things, you kind of have your bar mitzvah with the Jewish communities, and the Mexican community with at least the young women, you have your quinceañera, right? There's all these different things that are those, you're a man now. Well, nobody ever told me I was a man, right?
Right.
A little backstory about me and my family history is that my dad decided he was going to start a new relationship with another woman while he was still married to my mom, and then perpetuate that relationship for 3 years. And not just like on the sly, completely out in the open in a little town where this woman was staying out at her house. All of a sudden her kids are living out at my dad's house. So I stopped going home. Home wasn't a safe place. Home was a fucking nightmare. Why would I want to be there? So I've literally been on my own and struggling for survival since I was 14. And then when I graduated high school was like, deuces, I'm out of here. And then went out and just struggled on my own. And the drugs and the drinking didn't stop. And it led to felonies and all the things. Like, I didn't come out of that phase of my life until I was 32. And I was in prison. Like, it's so in that way, it finally gave me time to just stop surviving, right? Like, I didn't have to struggle to survive. They were going to feed me. They were going to house me. And I had a date that I was sitting to do. And in that time, divorced through another relationship and all of that. So I went through a lot just being in there. And then getting out and trying to put all the pieces together. And I don't think it was until maybe this year, because this year has been so trying, because, quit the regular, 9-to-5 job. I just couldn't do it anymore. And decided that I was going to build, I didn't know what the name or anything that it was going to be, but I wanted to build a community. I knew that's what my mission was. And I'd built a community around myself already, fans of my music and all of these venues and places that I've been. I already had that. So now finding where I could serve people, and by just talking, this is really nice for me. But to get these conversations out there, to share a little bit of my story with you and have you share your story, that's the service to, not just our community of artists and people that it started out as, but to the world as a whole. I think I'm very, very blessed to be exactly where I am now. Right.
I often talk about sobriety and Alcoholics Anonymous and the, getting sober was not the secret of Alcoholics Anonymous when I went there. The secret was one alcoholic talking to another. That was the rub for me, because there's a lot of people that I know that are educated in addiction, but they've never been an addict or a drunk, and they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So when I was sitting in those rooms, I kept hearing the stories and the fellowship, and I would go to prisons and halfway houses and you name it. I went because my yes was more important than my no. I began to say yes to myself after a lifetime of no's, and that carries on today. It's an important teaching of mine. In fact, I call it a Crowism. Say yes to yourself after a lifetime of no's, and nurture the nature of who and what I am. I really am. So the one alcoholic talking to another has come with me into my present life. And that's really what I'm doing. That's what the book did. It just touched your soul in where you were at in that place in your life when you were there. I related to you. We were just relating. We're relating now.
Yep. And that is relationship, right? You don't have a relationship, right? Like, you participate in a relationship. It is to be relational to each other, right? To be able to find that common ground. And maybe it's the whole life of insanity that I lived. I've experienced homelessness. I've experienced addiction, and thank God I'm still here to tell these stories and to share them with this next generation that's coming up. So a lot of them hopefully don't have to go through those things. And the reason that I was able to turn my life life around is because I started to read and to relate with other people that were like me, that came from a fucked up past, right? And was like, no, but you can change, but it has to be inside of you that you want to change. And you're going to have to face those pains. You're going to have to face the hurt that you've been numbing with drugs or alcohol or relationships, outside of yourself.
Right. I often say change is not that stuff in your pocket. Change is what's in your heart and soul. I mean, I don't chase outside entities to become. I go inside into the darkness to become the light. And there's a story about that in Conversations with God, where the little flame is crying and complaining about him not being able to see his light, and the son asks him, "What's wrong, little flame?" He says, "Well, your light is so bright, I can't see mine because of yours." And the son simply said, "Well, little light, if you want to see your own light, go into the darkness and show your light." And that's what I do. There's nothing for me out there that will help me shine brighter, but my insides will show what I am, just by going into the depths of my own darkness and saying yes to myself, and yes to my soul, and yes to my happiness, and yes to my kindness, and yes to your kindness, and yes to your happiness, and yes to all those things that I get to receive, like your hug and handshake when we met. I hope.
And that's really what it's all about, is finding where your light can shine and make the biggest difference. I think that's a huge takeaway from this conversation. Now, I know from reading your book that, going into Sweat Lodge and starting to take part in some of these ceremonies and participating in the communities, I have a feeling that it was much deeper to you to have the experiences with the people, much more than just the ceremony itself, right? Would you say that that's true?
I would say that's true, because I never spent much time with men. And that at the same time that I was evolving into Walking Crow, I came upon the Sweat Lodge because of a book that somebody gave me that was in my hometown of my birth, and where I became the healer. This all took place in the same place, but the Sweat Lodge was for men. There was a women's Sweat Lodge, but they sweated on a different day. It's the first time I had started to become a part of a community of men. At the same time, I was a musician in an Afrobeat orchestra that was 14 guys, right? So I was being engulfed in the men's world in a different way that allowed myself to be healed by the masculine energy around me instead of threatened by it.
I think you just touched on something that's so important as well, because we hear so much about the sacred feminine, and it's not anything, but there's a sacred masculine too, right? And there's so much power in that masculinity. And, I think that's almost been beat out of our society with the toxic masculinity and the kind of viewpoints coming out of the last 20 years. I think we're turning the tide on that too, though, that, men have to be free to be men and women have to be free to be women. Like, we need both of those energies working together to really ascend. And I know that from personal experience, that I wouldn't be half the man that I am today without my wife, who I've been with essentially since I walked out of the doors of the prison. And my wife, Danielle, was a CO at the prison, right? She was one of the correctional officers. Her parents both worked there. Her family still works there, right? Like, I kind of stepped out of the prison and right into what has become my life. I live 10 miles away from the place that I said I'd never go back to.
Right. It's interesting. My time around the men was a double-edged sword, because it wasn't so comfortable for me, because I wasn't given trust. I was given the ability to do something, but within the band that I was in, I wasn't a pot smoker and I wasn't a drinker. But there was always a younger guy trying to find an excuse to belittle me or to put me down, and finally I just got tired of it and said, you know what? You don't deserve me. And I left. I didn't have to be nasty about it. And even in my sweat lodge, I moved to Sedona, and it was as if I had done something wrong, or I was kind of like ignored. I was like, okay, whatever. But not reacting to them served me in a different way, because when it came to my one-on-one relationships, like I have a friend named Carlos. He's a defense attorney in Los Angeles. And the first time I went to Sweat, I invited him. We became friends in the coffee houses of Highland Park, a place in Los Angeles where I live. And he was telling me a story about when he was climbing Kilimanjaro. And while he was telling me, he started to cry. And he said, and he stopped himself because we were surrounded by guys in suits and guys who were tattooed from the movie industries and MMA fighters. So he stopped himself and he said, let's talk about this someplace else tomorrow. Well, I learned something about relationships and relating and how to relate. And this quote came up for me that I wrote. In fact, I call it a Crowism, because all the quotes that I share, I call Crowisms, because they come from me. I don't speak what other people speak. I speak what I speak. And it's this, and I think you'll understand it. Autonomy is the fluidity of movement within the unit of the pillars. Let me repeat that. Autonomy is the fluidity of movement within the unit of the pillars. Now, what is the unit? Carlos and I were a unit. You and I are a unit. You and your wife are a unit, right? You met. And you talk about the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. We're different. We're autonomous in our nature of who and what we are. But when we come together, we become the pillars. We become the structure, the doorway to walking in partnership. But we're still fluid in who we are within that relationship because we're autonomous. I think it's my job to maintain my autonomous nature and to respect, if I'm in a relationship with a woman, her autonomous nature, your autonomous nature. Your nature is none of my business. I'm not here to change you. I'm here to hopefully enhance you or her or however the case may be. It was a hard lesson for me through those experiences of Sweat Lodge and the band and other places, but I found my place within my soul, within my sovereignty of my autonomous nature. I don't have to live up to anybody's idea of what I'm supposed to be or do. I was married 3 times trying, and I don't want to say I failed miserably. I just chose poorly.
Oh, I think that's a good point for us to kind of end this talk today. I really want to thank you for your time and jumping on with me. I know we're going to get to do this again, and that's why I'm not afraid to cut it off. And otherwise, we could be on the phone for 3.5 hours probably, and to just keep going deeper and deeper. You want to go ahead and plug? You got a website or anything that people can find your book?
Yeah, they can find my book at www.sacreddrummedicine.com. In fact, there's 2 ways to purchase that on my website, sacreddrummedicine.com. You can buy it for $20, a signed copy. No, excuse me, that's $25 with shipping, a signed copy from me. Or you can buy 2 books for $29.95, both signed copies to whoever you want signed to, and they will be shipped to you. That's with shipping to you for $29.95. So you can do that. You can find my my drums, rattles, and all the things that I do on the same website. You can buy healing sessions or mentoring sessions or whatever it is you may be looking for, even if it's just to ask a question. I'm available for that, I hope.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Walking Crow. I really appreciate you, brother.
It was my pleasure, Bubba. I'm really blessed to have you in my life. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Remember to follow The Scene Projects on all your social media channels and get even more content at thesceneprojects.com.
No other to pour that love on me like water. Got an ocean full of love that's made for two.
Thanks for tuning in to the Scene Projects Podcast Network. We appreciate you listening. You can find more at thesceneprojects.com. Join our community.
No other to pour that love on me like water. Got an ocean full of love that's made for two. We can sail upon the ocean breeze and sunshine feels like you loving me. We got a good thing going on, you know that's true. I'm feeling fine, fine, fine. Pour your love on me like wine. Fill me